Money Talks is back. It's the last Friday in February. The endless winter continues. At least the good news is the first 4 months of winter are behind us. But we've only got 2 more months of winter before before we can stop wearing, coats and gloves. So good morning. I'm Mike Berry, Executive Director of WASBO, and on with our usual cast and crew. So, good morning, Brian. Good morning, Andy. How you guys doing?
Like, good.
Brian is in Minnesota, right?
Yep.
So
Um,
he sounds like he's a little drugged up, but it's just the audio feed. So hang in there with us, Brian. Well, hey, the good news is it's a sunny day in Madison. So, right? Madison is such an interesting political town. The divide politically in Madison between the liberals on the one hand and the ultra liberals on the other. I never get tired of following Madison politics. So, Anne Chapman is joining us. Anne is the student in high school that you always wanted a copy off of an English class. So, hi, Anne. How are you?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
All right.
Good.
Thanks for joining us. Wow, there's a lot going on in kind of the big issues in school finance. Holy cow. Between, let's see, we're going to talk about the state surplus, and we're going to talk about this lawsuit and a November constitutional ballot measure regarding the veto, which affects revenue limits and all that. Before we jump into that, I what I think is the quote of the month um, to share. I think it's kind of a scary, it's interesting and scary quote. So this is from a newspaper story from Amory, Wisconsin, which you go as far north as you can in Wisconsin, and then you keep going, and then you get to Amory. And here, this is the quote. This is from Debbie Burnett at Baird, I think she was speaking to the Amory School Board, kind of advising them. But she said, and this got picked up in the media coverage. She said 40% of Wisconsin school districts ran deficit budgets last year. I just thought, wow, that's interesting, right? That is something to keep your eye on, right? So yeah, it's tough out there. So but that's what we're here for, because we answer all your questions um and help you navigate all this. So here's our usual panel and our our disclaimer that we're just here sharing our opinions, but then again, we're almost always right. So there. Okay. So why don't we get started with the state budget surplus, deal or no deal? I guess it's no deal yet, right? Um, okay, so Anne, let me ask you a couple questions just to get this kind of grounded, and then we're going to shift and talk with Andy and Brian about like what does this really mean if you're busy running a school district. So, okay, so Wisconsin's running a budget surplus, and what's going on there?
So in January, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau came out with updated projections on where the general fund's going to end at the end of this biennium. So at the end, when the budget was passed, the surplus had, when we walked into this current budget, the surplus was $4.3 billion. And as a result of everything that happened during the biennium, that surplus was dwindled down to about 770 million. So it was a big spend, like
Yeah.
they definitely used it. And not on general aid, as we all know. And then in January, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau came back and said, as a result of what we're projecting, mainly in the area of income tax and corporate tax, franchise taxes, we're going to see a much bigger surplus at the end of this biennium, and they updated it to about 2.4 million or 2.4 billion. And most of that is, so what that means is that it was about 1.5 billion more than they had projected at the end of when the budget was passed. And about 90% of that increase is from the individual income and corporate income taxes.
Okay.
And so that's where it's coming from. That's where we're sitting right now.
Okay. So we've occasionally had this happen over the years. Often the lawmakers have two choices: either do nothing and just let that extra revenue fall to the fund balance for the state, which almost to me seem kind of like their default position usually. But the other option is, well, it's an election year, right? And I guess both parties in the Capitol have some interest in addressing issues that are important to them. So they might actually, consider acting on this surplus. And they made a pretty aggressive run at it over the last couple of weeks, but as of now, it's no deal. And I think this is where it left off. This is obviously, pretty high level, but so the part that we remain most interested in is 200 million for special ed aid to get the percentages to match what they said in the original budget, right? 42% this year and 45% next year. That would be nice. And then the horse trading for that is what, $500 million in school levy tax credits, or the governor would say in general aid, right? It seems to
No,
be
he wanted both.
he wanted both.
Yeah, in fact, he was proposing more than 500 million. He was proposing 550 million in school
Okay.
fees,
I mean,
but
I think
also general aid. Yeah.
we were always taught, that general aid is the kind of academically more pure and logical form of tax relief, and I still believe that. Um, and if you've got money and you want to drive down school taxes, you do it through the general aid formula. School levy tax credits are a different way to do it. It's a different set of winners and losers. Um, we've
And
had
it's
it for a long time. Go ahead, Andy.
and it's hidden from us, right? Like that
Yeah,
money totally bypasses us and goes right to the municipalities. So we don't see our levy rates go down or anything. It's done after the fact.
yeah, right.
Yeah, and I
It
mean,
used to be hidden from us until you and Pete revealed it. And
yes,
It's
the
right.
big reveal.
That's right.
But I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
the other point is like yes, general aid and school levy tax credit both provide property tax relief, but the way we've designed school funding in Wisconsin is to equalize
right,
property wealth. So this is disequalizing. So I mean,
right.
you can think what you want about it, but it goes against the way the state really has designed school funding.
That's right. I don't think
for,
anyone on our side is like cheering for the levy credits so much as saying, well, we really want the special ed aid. And it's kind of like, all right, hold your nose and agree to school levy tax credits. It's better than nothing. Brian?
I just want to say, either way, it's not spendable. And
Yeah.
either way, all school districts already took the hit.
For
So I
Yeah.
this year.
mean, we took
Yeah.
we took our beating already.
Yeah.
We'll have another one this next fall. It's probably not going to be in the scale of 500 million. We probably won't need that much to cover it. So
Right.
like when I'm talking to our community, they're like, well, you guys are going to get all this money. You don't need to referendum it. Like the majority of it is in non-spendable. It's property tax relief.
Good point.
So it
Is it?
doesn't really matter either way.
And depending on what people budgeted for special education aid, right, there's a hole to fill. So people might be having less money this year. So we got to get those holes filled first.
That's
And
right.
two, I would argue, they do have a surplus, but their rainy day fund is also not super big. I mean,
2.1 billion?
yeah, that's only like, what is it, like a month of operation? Like it's a state of Wisconsin. Like compared to other states, our rainy day fund is pretty small. I mean, I'm not arguing for it, but like in the scale of a state, you know, that, but our legislators have never been keen on having a fund balance or a rainy day fund because it's all just wasted money. Why don't we just spend it all? And,
Yeah, it's
like if
big.
tax revenue stopped, I mean, our state would be in trouble. I mean,
It's
they'd burn
bigger
through that
than
one.
historically, though, the rainy day
Yes.
fund, it's been growing. Yeah.
Yes.
Doesn't rain that much here anyway. But the key is this special ed aid. You know, we've been kind of preaching on this webinar for 6 months or more to like be a little wary of this 42 and 45% issue because there's the risk of proration, right? And then boy, were we right, unfortunately, because currently DPI is prorating at what, 35? Um, if you listen to Pete, the prognosticator, and others in this who like to run these numbers, we think 37, 38, maybe 38 and a half at the most. But um, I understand somebody was just quoting this that we've a lot of districts budgeted much higher than 38 and a half, didn't they?
Yes. Yeah. Pete Grender has done some really interesting data digging and analysis, and we were able to sort of see where districts are budgeting, and at least 100 districts are budgeting more than 40% for this year, which is, I mean, if
Oh,
we, what's that?
I said, ouch.
Yeah, so I'm like, the interesting thing is the governor and the Republican leadership are in agreement about the special ed. Like they're like in lockstep about that. They're okay with 200 putting 200 million in for special ed, but it's these other things going on that are causing the deal to get wound up. So we just don't know if that's going to happen. It's a real big question mark, especially since the assembly has adjourned its regular session. We don't know. They don't have a deadline kind of driving a deal like they did before. And so there is just a big question mark as to whether we're going to get that. So yeah, to be budgeting 40% or above is a little risky.
Yeah, a little risky. So SAA, the lobbyist folks for us, um, their take on this is kind of aligned, with encouraging the governor to go with the $500 million for general aid, which is kind of a classic, SAA's position. And so I suppose that's still our lead foot, but
Yeah.
I guess we're all kind of looking at this and going, well, if it comes right down to it, there might have to be some deal making to get that special ed aid. So we'll see.
I just want to point out one thing with the 35%. Like DPI still isn't done. There's still districts that are outstanding on their special ed reports. So if you're out there and you haven't, and you're getting emails from Rick, please work with them to get it done so that they can close out and they can actually know what the reimbursement level is going to be. I mean, because that's what's holding it up right now. There's still a handful of districts that haven't done all their in and outs. So if you or your neighbor, your neighbors are struggling, reach out and try to help them.
I think high cost is due today too, isn't it?
That's due next week. Next
week.
Monday, Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mondays, Becky says.
Well, if anybody knows, put it in the chat. And
Monday.
and for once, could we just kind of change and say nice things about us for a change in the chat? I'm tired of people beating us up in the chat. Come on, you guys. So there is a third element to this surplus deal around income tax, a rebate. The key there is it's got to be one time, right? One time only kind of thing, so we don't permanently damage the revenue streams for state government. So I think the idea that it being one time is like kind of what has helped make that sort of agreeable, maybe between the various negotiating parties here.
The
Then,
governor doesn't like that.
I'm sorry.
The Governor doesn't like the tax rebate idea. The big difference between what the governor proposed and what they've got on the table is he wanted at least 450 million in general aid, and he did not want the one-time tax rebate. So yeah, they're just a little bit philosophically divided.
Yeah, this on the screen shows the legislative proposal,
Yeah, yeah,
not the governor's proposal.
yeah.
So I didn't want to get involved in a big effort here to reconcile the two positions. Just wanted to sort of point out kind of what the big pieces are here. Anyway, the state assembly left, um, and they've adjourned, but apparently they can be brought back if a deal is made possible. So we will see. Again, the root of all this is special aid for us, and the source of our problem, of course, it's in the law as some certain, not some sufficient. We have to keep fighting for some sufficient. This is just too big of an issue to be so poorly defined year to year. It puts way too much guesswork on the school districts. Um, and I guess I'll turn it over to Andy and Brian. So let's go through both scenarios. What happens if um, wonder of wonders, they come back in and approve some kind of surplus package and put the extra 200 million in as special ed aid? How does that play out at the school district level? And you're the current treasurer, so you get to go first.
So, the first thing is we have to look at, what we projected for this year, right? So we did not use 42% as our projection. We used 39%. We think it's going to be a little bit lower than that. So the first thing we got to do is fill the hole that exists in our current budget, right? That's important to recognize that. So when you're talking to your board and they're asking for what this means, make sure that we mention that first. And then look at the rest of the budget and see how it's doing, obviously, before we start thinking about, additional initiatives or whatever, as well as start thinking about what next year's budget looks like. Maybe if we do get some extra one-time money, when I say one-time this year, right? Because you have obligations for next year. Think about, how your budget's doing. If there are some one-time things that you can spend that money on, so it's not obligated, so it helps you for your budget for next year, that would be a thing to think about. But I think the first thing is fill the hole, and then think about it from a long-term perspective.
Okay. And yeah, you're right about that. If a surplus deal is announced, you might show up to work one morning and there'll be a line of like 30 people standing in the business office. And from my experience, it will typically be the librarians will be first in line, followed by student services staff, followed by the athletic director.
You
All,
forgot the
all,
music.
all
You forgot the music, folks.
music, yes, fine arts, yes, exactly, music folks, all holding up a newspaper saying, "You've got more money and we know it." And you've got to address this need. So, Brian, what happens if they don't cut a deal? What happens in your world?
Feel really put on the spot and like I have to come clean, and so I will. I was a little too aggressive with high cost aid. Um,
Uh-oh.
so I knew we had a ton of expenses last year. It just didn't line up like I wanted to. So um, we'd be a little short on special ed. If the deal does come through, then our special ed fund should be made whole. But I did budget less than 42% because I didn't think, I mean, they're not going to give more money.
Right.
They're never going to go over and be like, surprise, you actually have 43%.
Right.
Like,
You're not the only one, Brian. I think a lot of people did that, right? So I was hoping my interest revenue would kind of hold up, but interest rates are starting to go down. So, yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah.
I always tell my board it's a budget. Like it's your best educated guess, kind of like, and we don't tend to do budget adjustments because it is, I mean, we feel like we plan for what was in the budget, and if we go over, there's reasons that we went over, but we don't usually adjust it. I mean, DPI probably doesn't like that because then all the aid estimates are wonky, but I just don't believe to adjust our budget to actual spend. That doesn't tell the whole picture.
Yeah. And any sense, Anne, of when like what's next? Is this going to just sit there for 2 months, or any idea what's going on with it?
With the like a potential deal.
Yeah. Does anybody know?
I don't think anybody knows. There's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of concern that the assembly adjourned without making a deal because that deadline seemed to be the catalyst that was really driving negotiations. Um, it seemed like everybody really wanted to make a deal, and now there's no timeline push. So I think anybody
Yeah.
who says they know, they don't, but it's concerning. You know, it's less likely than it was when there was a deadline, when the assembly was still in session. But both the governor and Speaker Voss have said we'll come back. I mean, the governor said you should stay in session until we make a deal, but Voss said we'll come back for special session or extraordinary session if we need to. So long way of saying we don't know.
As long as that 1.5 billion's at play, I mean, they're not going to give that up. I mean, Evers is kind of right. I mean, that's buying votes, unless they
Yeah.
choose to give it out in December or, after the election.
Yeah,
Um,
like the impetus that was causing them to be keen to come to an agreement around this elect because it's an election year is still in play. That's true. That's different than in non-big election years, like we walked into the last, like I said, biennium with $4.3 billion in the bank. They didn't spend it before the budget started. This time they want to spend it. So that's still there. That's a good point.
when's the Senate done?
There's sometime in March, I think.
This seems like one of those situations where like the first one to speak kind of loses, right? Like the first one to say they want to make a deal kind of is at a disadvantage, if you know what I mean. So they're probably both thinking, I'm not going to blink first. But
I
hopefully,
don't know, Mike. I think it's interesting that the governor seems to negotiate for the Republicans sometimes in giving things that both sides would like. Um, to kind of foresee what the negotiations is going to be, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but instead of just sticking to, I just want it this way, and then through negotiations we'll get it back to in the middle.
yeah. Well, he's in his last year. He might be burning all of his sick days, So yeah, because he's going to be done, So, all right, that's all right. We're done on that one.
Real
Any
quick, it
final comments?
looks like Senate regular session ends March 19th, but special sessions can happen all the way through, like bills can be sent to the governor all the way through May. Just wanted to
Okay.
close that loop.
Really,
So I
the
think March 19th would be the next kind of in the next couple of weeks. I would guess that they'd bring them back.
if that doesn't happen, then we're looking at, the next motivation is taxes, property taxes, right? So something have to be done in the fall before levies are
Right.
set and going out and everything. So, yeah,
But
I
they're
think
also
you're right.
they're also going to be campaigning too.
Right.
I mean, they're going to want to get done so then they can,
Yep.
do their real work of being reelected.
And make claims in their campaigns of what they've brought to the people. Yeah.
Right. They can
I
all
want to
get
hear
out there.
that.
You can all get out there and lie to us. Okay. So as if that's not enough to keep us occupied, here comes another really big deal. Um, was it Monday of this week?
Yeah, it feels like 3 weeks ago, but yeah, it
Wasn't
was
it?
just Monday.
So, especially we had the federal funding conference on Monday and Tuesday. By the way, DPI team, the federal funding team from DPI, they do a fantastic job. Shelley Babler and Rachel Zelmer and their whole teams. And that includes Matt and Rick and Olivia, the whole gang. They do a wonderful job. So, I think we were in at this conference when we saw that the new funding lawsuit has been filed in Eau Claire County Court, and I'll get into that with you in a second. I think there are a number of us who were working as business managers in 1999, 2000. It wasn't that long ago. Okay, it was that long ago, but still, it was called Vincent v. Voigt. This was the last time Wisconsin school funding formula was challenged in front of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And I was working at this time. And what I remember about this, and it's kind of hard to think, kind of get your head back into like the where we were then. But back then, revenue limits were still kind of like this like new and shocking thing. They'd only been around for about 6 years, maybe five when the lawsuit was being, worked on before it actually got filed. So if I remember right, it was really centered around that. It was like, wait a minute, some of these districts are locked in at very little revenue per pupil. Some are kind of in the middle, some are way high. How is this even fair? It says as uniform as practicable in the state constitution. And this is, that seemed to be the push. And I'm obviously simplifying here.
Back then we had the three-sided stool or the three-legged stool, right? So
yes,
there was some reform related to labor negotiations. There was a
Julio.
huge influx of state aid, and then there was the revenue limit.
And then 2/3 funding.
Right.
Yeah.
Huge influx of state aid, right? So the intent really was at that time starting to close some of those gaps. That's what the revenue limit was doing. But with all the referendums and everything now, it's gone the other way.
Well, the revenue limit was trying to pull back property tax.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know that they were trying to equalize anything.
Well, just because there was a floor, right? Everybody was going up by the same amount.
Right.
That's true. So, so that case went forward, but ultimately the Supreme Court upheld, or I guess supported, the current funding mechanism as it stood then. But there was also a lot of commentary by the judges, like this method, we're not going to strike it down, but we got a few things to say about it because it's far from perfect, right? And the leading sort of voice on that was the opinion by then Justice Crooks, right? So, Anne, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, the most famous quote from that Vincent v. Voigt lawsuit, which, as Mike said, was really about, it was basically saying the school finance system was not constitutional because it doesn't equalize resources. That was the key to it. And Justice Crooks wrote, the system is, like Mike said, the decision upheld the school finance system, but Justice Crooks said that Justice Crooks basically gave us a little bit more language around what the Constitution requires. And he said that, he sort of reiterated Wisconsin students have a fundamental right to an equal opportunity for a sound basic education. And then he sort of went on to detail how do we define a sound basic education. And then he said, in addition, what that would require is that the school finance system takes account of districts that have disproportionate numbers of students with disabilities, English learners, and students in poverty. And that as long as the system adequately takes account of those students to provide them with a sound basic education, the system will pass constitutional muster. And the key to that is that the corollary must also be true. If the system is not adequately taking account of those three students, among other things, but that's a really key part of it. If the system is not taking account of those students adequately, it doesn't pass constitutional muster. That's sort of the implication. And so this new lawsuit really picks up on where that left off and says it's gotten a lot worse since then, especially when it comes to students with disabilities, but also English learners and students in poverty. But this lawsuit really emphasizes the way the school finance system fails to account for the needs of students with disabilities in a number of different ways. And instead of citing the constitutional violations on the basis that we're not equalizing things correctly, it says we're not providing adequate resources. So even though that lawsuit failed in the sense that it was ruled that the system could be upheld, it really did sort of provide a roadmap that is being built on now to prove that the system is no longer passing constitutional muster. I mean, it's very sort of like lock and key connected with the Vincent Boyd case.
It reminds me of on Monday when we were at federal funding, Rachel Zoma was doing her presentation and she had a slide that said, your financial limitations are not a valid rationale for not fully funding each student's IEP. Which is
Right.
absolutely, absolutely true.
Yep.
But then we're left to kind of try to, figure this out in the back end, right? And budget balancing. Which just is kind of just how it shows how relevant these funding issues are. Okay, well, who are the plaintiffs? And it seemed like kind of a random group of plaintiffs.
Yeah, so the plaintiffs are basically 5 different school districts that so the plaintiffs are mainly 5 different school districts, and the reason these school districts were chosen is that the people sort of designing the lawsuit felt like these were districts that exemplified some of the arguments they were making about how the school finance system fails to meet constitutional requirements. So the districts are Adams Friendship, Beloit, Green Bay, Eau Claire, and Necedah. And then, so it's the districts themselves, and then kind of a broad set of stakeholders within the districts that the claim sort of says these are different kinds of stakeholders that are affected by this failure of the school finance system. So there's teachers, parents, students, just taxpayers. So there's districts, and then there's individuals related to those districts.
Okay, so it's not as random as it might appear.
It's not
Uh,
random at all.
right.
Yeah, the districts that were chosen were selected to be representative of the problems that the complaint is laying out.
Okay, so like Eau Claire might illustrate low revenue. Okay, okay. What remedy or correction are they going for?
So my dog is next to me drinking, so I was
That's
turned off
okay.
my audio
I
there. Sorry.
found that Money Talks is very popular with canines, cats.
Oh, they're loving it.
All household animals love Money
I don't know
Talk.
if you can hear, but I'm just like, oh my God, perfect timing.
You just
Um,
somebody just sent
so
a talk emoji flying across the screen. Thank you, whoever did that. Probably Ross.
I'm
Go
sure
ahead.
Ross, yeah. So the remedy, so the interesting thing is the lawsuit is pointing out, these specific problems with the school finance system and how they violate various parts of the Constitution. And so, but the outcome they're seeking is basically just to declare that the system is unconstitutional under these 3 parts of the there's 3 different articles or 3 different sections of the Constitution that they cite. And then the other thing, after declaring that these things are unconstitutional, they're asking the court to establish a schedule that so basically they're basically asking the court to make sure the legislature fixes these things in a
So
reasonable amount of time. So they're not saying what should happen. They're saying these things are a problem and they're unconstitutional and the legislature needs to fix it and the court needs to make sure the legislature does that in a timely manner.
okay.
So this lawsuit, if it plays out, will just sort of establish that something needs to be done.
Got it.
The process of something getting done will happen later. And that's why kind of alongside this lawsuit, there's like a public awareness effort to help the general public understand what the problems are that have driven this lawsuit, because in the end, this is going to be a matter of the legislature being held accountable again for doing what it's supposed to do. And that becomes kind of a political electoral issue as well.
Okay. And if the lawsuit fails, then the current system of funding is sustained.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so I've been watching the news coverage. I was really interested to see like how controversial would this be, and so on. So there were two takes on this that I thought were interesting. One was from one of the I'd say sort of more conservative leaning think tanks that was saying, well, this lawsuit's all about kind of thwarting or frustrating the agenda of the private voucher community. I thought that was an interesting take. What do you make of that?
That is an absolute I don't know, even exaggeration isn't even strong enough of a word. The only way that the vouchers are sort of implicated in this lawsuit is basically to say that they contribute to the fact that that sort of resources are being sort of diverted away from public schools. It's not about whether we should have a voucher system or not. There's sort of two things. Number one, we have a constitutional requirement to fund public schools, and we need resources to do that. And we've done a whole bunch of things to reduce resources for public schools, including the revenue limits and other things. Vouchers is just sort of one of those things that is contributing to the need that public schools don't have the resources they need. And the other piece is that, especially when it comes to special education, they point to the fact that there's a standard that the legislature has set in the way it funds the special needs voucher. And it's basically said, the legislature recognizes that students with special needs have a higher, we need to fund them at a higher level. And the way we know that is that we're funding special needs vouchers at least 90%. So it doesn't make sense that we should be funding public school kids at 35%.
Yeah.
So that's the nature of the voucher conversation. It really is just sort of like contributing to the overall argument that there are inadequate resources for public schools. That's really all it's doing.
Okay.
And they're funding them at 90%, some sufficient too, right?
Right, exactly. And honestly, as you all have probably heard me say, for all intents and purposes, they're funding special needs vouchers at 100%, some sufficient, except for like 7 kids or something. Like it's a very small number of the participants. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So that is the real rub when it comes to where the vouchers come in on this lawsuit. It's not a voucher lawsuit at all.
That's kind of how it struck me. It was like a comparison thing. It was like,
It contributes to the overall argument, which
yeah,
is not a voucher argument. Yeah.
right. Okay, so then this other part, I only heard from one lawmaker, but I thought, oh boy. And his take was, hey, if this lawsuit prevails, it's going to be bad news for taxpayers because the schools are going to have, a much, greater opportunity to tax people. And I thought, oh man, I don't think that that's really what they're getting at. I actually thought it was kind of the opposite, which is the current system is reliant upon local operating referenda like crazy, which is falling on the local taxpayers because the state piece is not sufficient. He took a different tack, and maybe that was more of like a motivate your audience kind of approach. What do you make of this? It's a break the bank moment for public ed.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that too, and I've heard that in general in conversations about what happened with this last state budget where the legislature didn't put general aid in. It is obfuscating the way we've designed school funding in our state. The way we do school funding and the way we have been talking about doing school funding in the state since we became a state is that the state should be supporting public schools at a 2/3 ratio. in order to offset the effects on property taxes. So to
That,
say that this is a money grab that's going to hurt taxpayers is like, that's not the way we do it. What's that?
yeah.
Disingenuous might be a word.
Disingenuous is a very generous word.
I mean,
Well,
this day and age, you can say anything you want, and it's true.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, these false imagery. Like I just saw like Badger Institute this morning put out that all those that are seeking the lawsuit are above the state average, whatever number they used for that. So they're pairing it up like these districts are just crying like they need more money, even though that they have more money than most districts anyways. And it's not about that. It's about the equity and in funding and all that. Like
Well, no,
they're just cherry
adequacy.
picking,
It-
yeah, adequacy.
yeah,
They're just cherry picking
yeah.
specific things. Like someone, the voucher was on something, and oh, it's about the vouchers. We want to shut them down. And for my opinion, I don't really care about the private vouchers, but they just need to fund them. That's not our problem. Like
yeah.
Right.
they have two systems, they need to fund both of them. Then you can't take from one to give to another because that's not,
Well, no, they don't have to fund both of them. They only have to fund one of them is sort of the
well, they
point.
can choose to fund both of them.
Yes, right. Yeah.
I think what is so fundamental, and I want to mention this because it's so fundamental. Um, how do we even say this? I think a lot of us, because we cover the year, the biennial budgets, right? We kind of think that whatever the lawmakers and the governor agree to and put into the budget, well, that's what it is, and that's how public schools are going to be funded and operated. But there is another standard that which is rooted in the Wisconsin Constitution, right? We don't just get whatever the currently elected officials want to do with public ed. It still has to be held to the constitutional standard. And I think sometimes we forget about that, right? So now we're going to find out, has the current system drifted too far from the constitutional standard or not? Really interesting. And I also think if for us history nerds, that they were literally talking two-thirds funding in 1847, the year before we became a state.
Yeah,
So
very cool.
everything old is new again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's skip to Brian, Andy. You probably got board members who are wondering, what does all this mean? Do you write up a little brief? Do you use WASBO stuff? Do you talk about it at your board meeting? What does this mean? Or is it too early, or how do you handle this?
So we do budget things and try to get ahead of staffing. So just this last Monday, we were talking about staffing, and we call it the very, very preliminary budget look of things so that we can move forward, replacing positions mostly, or if there's a transfer of service thing that we can anticipate. So we talked a little bit about everything from a budget perspective and how this all plays out. Didn't get into the lawsuit because obviously it had just hit that day. But just starting to have those discussions and kind of provide a lay of the land.
Brian, is your board interested in any of this?
Trying to figure out how to spend the extra money right away next year.
Okay. Well,
We figure we'll have about $1 billion more, so we're on a hiring spree, and
right,
it's going to be status
right,
quo. I mean, these lawsuits first, like, say for some reason it would, hit the court in 45 days they have to name, or 75 days. So let's just say by December 31st, it gets through this in the Supreme Court and they settle it. Like, it's still not going to be like that court decision isn't going to be, you have to do X, Y, and Z.
right.
It's going to be push it back to the legislator to figure it out. And we all know how that works. I mean, they can barely get a budget passed by July 1st. So that's going to be what, 1 to 2 to 3 years
Yeah.
dragged out, like it was in Pennsylvania. And then we're going to get something. So, I mean, I wouldn't count anything right now. I mean, there's just nothing out there. I mean, obviously it's good to you know, talk about it and be informational about it, but um, that there's nothing really there right now.
No, this is a long-term process.
I mean,
Right.
I do think it's a better lawsuit than the one, when was it, Ann, 2 years ago or a year ago from
The
Minnetonka Brewing?
Yeah,
Oh, brewing.
that's they're not even comparable. The
Yeah.
Monaco one, and I wonder if that's partly why people are like able to obfuscate and say this is a voucher thing, because the Monaco one was a voucher thing and it wasn't a coalition, it wasn't thought out, it wasn't done in collaboration with anything sort of academic. So
I think the best thing
Yeah.
is just to educate people on what is going on. And once, we get those firm talking points from WASBO that, we can start to have those conversations, and maybe that'll get the public to start questioning legislators on it, and maybe they'll make the fixes before this even gets settled.
that's part of the potential effort. I mean, that's part of the function of lawsuits in other states. It can put legislative pressure on legislatures, put public pressure on legislatures. And like I said, that's also the reason why there's a parallel kind of communications effort to help people understand
Yeah.
what this is about.
Like Bob's comment, he's very optimistic. He said Kansas schools litigation lasted 14 years.
They all
Micah,
last a
Micah, I
long
wonder what
time.
your hair will look like
Right.
in 14 years.
Well, I should announce here that due to Brian's salty attitude, interviews to replace Brian on Money Talks will be held next week. Just email me, send in your resume, and we'll see about whether we'll schedule you for an interview. Um, Andy, that early budget in when I was in Madison was called, like, semi-officially called the "How Screwed Are We" budget. Um, and uh, and unfortunately, that was a really accurate, descriptor.
Always
Okay,
be optimist, Mike. Nice
I
job.
know, right? Um, so now we got a third one. We won't spend as much time on this because this is still sort of evolving. But based on the actions in lawmakers last week or two, we will now have a statewide constitutional amendment or amendments, and you might be able to help me. One or two, I forget how it's.
Just one related to the veto.
This is November of 26, and this would, as you can see here, affect the governors, and not just Tony Evers. It means the
Right.
governor, whoever it may be,
Right.
for now and all time, the governor's partial veto authority, and it would restrict that authority. And it seems to have its roots in the so-called 400-year veto. But I mean, to be fair, there's only 396 years left, so it's amortizing quickly. Nobody reacted that much when didn't Scott Walker do this with the energy
Out
the revenue?
1,000 years.
1,000 years, yeah.
1,000 years. Okay, so
Mike,
We've
I would
only got
assume,
we only got 992 left.
and I would assume if Walker didn't do that, we probably wouldn't have had this one.
yeah, right.
Maybe. Interesting.
Well,
In fact, when it happened, right, I think Walker defended it and said, "Yeah, the governor has this authority."
so there's a lot of legal questions I don't understand yet about this. Like, would this strip away the 325? Or would it just be like, could it be like retroactive like that? Or, um,
I don't think so. So there's kind of two things going on at once. There's this constitutional amendment that is going to go to the voters, which is definitely in response to what the governor did, because it specifically says governors can't increase funding. Governor Walker's 1,000-year veto decreased funding. So there's a difference there. And like Mike said, the partial veto authority has been around since the 1930, I think,
yeah,
but it's been curtailed 9 times. This would be the 10th time. So it's gotten less and less powerful over a long period of time. So this would just basically say going forward, governors can't use the veto authority to increase. There's there's other legislation that's also that just got passed by both the Assembly and the Senate that specifically wants to repeal this 400-year veto and sunset it in
Oh,
2027, 28, which would be in the middle of the next biennium. But that would have to go to Governor Evers, and he would veto that probably.
okay.
One would.
Yeah, the constitutional amendment like goes past the governor, right? So
Yeah. And it's not about the 400-year veto specifically,
right.
you know,
Okay.
I
directly.
want to make the point that Brian Cray made in the chat, because I've been making it every time too, is this is just silly because $325 is not going to be much in now. It's barely CPI for some districts in the state. And in 5, 10, 15 years, it's going to be less. So
I totally agree with that.
They were
No,
just so mad.
Ann, I wonder if we update your graph that you do to add in the 325, like if we would have when they uncoupled from CPI.
we'll never catch. We'll never catch it, right? In fact, it probably will
Oh,
hurt.
I mean, it's still going to be a lot lower than if it would have been connected to CPI, and that's the whole point.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
looking
exactly.
backwards, even with
Right.
CPI low, it's still going to not be.
It's not the CPI now, so it's not going to be CPI going forward.
It'll
Yeah.
make it worse, actually, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, if we leave it at 325, yeah. It's the bare minimum. And the thing that's funny is that the 325 was put in place by the previous legislature and they funded it. So it's not like they were opposed to it.
well, that was our catch up, remember? For all our zeros that we got.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, interestingly, the 325 does not raise anybody's taxes. It raises revenue
Right.
authority. It's not a direct tax on anybody.
But like Brian said, the way it gets painted, they can say whatever they want. And that is what they're saying. They're saying the governor, doomed future, seniors living on fixed incomes, to higher property taxes. And it's like, that's not what happened. Yeah.
Government. Um, okay, so there'd be a lot more to come on this one. As if the November ballot didn't have enough implications for everybody, right? We've got all sorts of things on the November ballot, including probably a whole slate of operating referenda,
Mhm.
probably some capital referenda. What a governor's race, right? This
Supreme Court,
Supreme Court, it's just
state
crazy.
legislative, yeah.
Yeah. So 2026, I think, is going to end up being a very important year. We probably can't measure it until we get, some years ahead and can look back at it. But I think a lot of fundamental decisions will be made in 2026. So, you guys are all busy running school districts and dealing with all sorts of issues, large and small, with your school board and with, does anybody, do we have the bus loading zones covered and did the is the milk cooler still working and everything in between. So, we tried this morning to give you the bigger perspective, we perseverate over this stuff so you don't have to kind of approach. But you'll be hearing a lot more about all three of these topics as we go into the accounting conference, which is in La Crosse in a couple of weeks. Be there. Um, and then obviously the spring conference in May. So lots more uh, lots lots more to talk about and looking forward to that. So I think that's pretty much it. Oh, this is just an FYI. I think pretty much everyone has already seen this, but just want to make sure in case you missed it. Um, uh, the CPI for July 1 is 2.63. I think John Stelmacher is still driving from school district to school district to talk individually with everybody about this. I know he follows it very closely and he wants to make sure everybody knows about this, the Stelmacher index. So 2.63 is the number. I think that's it then. Um, so
Well, that's an
any
important question for you and Andy, and I just can't get it out of my mind. We're talking about 1999 and 2000. So, what did your guys' hair look like in 1999?
I had hair.
I mean,
as
was it
did
like a
I.
hairband, like the metal big hairband, or?
Look, in fact,
I
look at my Google thing.
Is it
I
a
think it
mullet?
have it on there.
yeah, absolutely. I used to buy like shampoo and conditioner.
Yeah.
It was a whole different thing.
I
Um,
spent so much money on that and haircuts. I'm
Do
much,
you like whipping
much
your
better
hair
off.
around?
oh well. Um, I mean that was like a whole different millennium, wasn't it?
It
So,
was,
um,
technically.
any other words of wisdom from the gang?
Enjoy your extra 3 minutes of daylight every day right now. It's a good time.
Exactly. Okay. Anne, anything else?
No, good to
Well,
see everybody.
yeah, let me just wrap up by saying thank you so much. It's great to have this forum every month. We really look forward to it. Hope you're doing well, and hopefully we see you at the accounting conference in a few weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.